Hello, I'm Minga Claggett-Borne from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm part of New England Yearly Meeting, and I am so amazed to be among you today. I never thought this would happen. So join with me as we explore, how do Quakers respond in times of crisis? This is part of the theme that we all are struggling with. So one of my aspects that help me is looking at this faith that came from the Christian tradition of Trinity. And if you have a marker beside you and some paper, you might want to write some things down, like I found that one of the ways that I orient myself in these crisis times is, traditional Christianity, they had, I hope you can see this, Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. But those words don't work for me, nor does the hierarchy in Christianity work for me. So as a Quaker, I took the practice of using unique experiences of God. Some people see the inner light as seed, or as the word, or as a light in darkness. And so for me, I took, well, what is my Trinity? And so awe is the first motion that I have in this universe. And then I wanted to include, well, what is all around me that is leading me towards that spirit of awe and love? And that's beauty. And then the third aspect is what rises up in me, which is some joy that I contribute in the form of song or something else. So write down a triangle, and what are your three principles that lead you on your path? Just be original. No right or wrong. We're living in a new reality beyond that of right and wrong. So thanks for that experiment. I do want to say that we have a faith that is not passive, even though it looks like in silent worship that we are being passive. Centering is a very active engagement. And I want to move into one of my precepts up until last year is that I've said to myself, well, if I'm encountering evil, expect there to be grace. But in 2019, I went to the southern border and I worked at Tijuana in a large building called the Caracol in Espanol. And it was just 3 blocks from the border, from the port of entry, from the wall. I stayed there a few weeks, and it was hard work volunteering there. In Spanish, I spent days listening to trauma stories from the refugees that had traveled overland to try to enter the United States. So any day of my stay there were about 25 volunteers working in this large building, and there would be 60 refugees that would roll in every afternoon. And I thank God that there was enough of us volunteers. I was very grateful that I had volunteers, so I wasn't so alone there. I had my Trinity, I had mantras, and a spiritual practice. Because the very first day I got there, Luis, our human rights director of the volunteers, said, we aren't providing enough here. I'm going to train everyone here to prepare our guests, that's what he called the refugees, our guests for their credible hearing when they ask for asylum from Homeland Security. But the agency here doesn't run on money or knowledge. It mostly runs on love. So my work there was part charity and part communion, and totally spiritual. So being at the wall is a division, the separation of people being blocked from loving and sharing is evil. And a lot of my life work is, one, being a therapist and a healer, but also being a practitioner of nonviolence. So how do we work as Quakers to explain the steps of what Jesus asked us to do, is loving our enemy. Well, I went there hoping for grace. I met Eduardo, who had participated in a lot of violence in his family, from Honduras. I met people who were raped. I met children who had been pulled away from gangs. And all of these people who had been so exposed to violence acted very kindly in our shelter called El Caracol. And so my role, well, yeah, we prepared lots of peanut butter sandwiches, and I listened to the stories, and I helped them write down the facts so that they could have as many specific facts for their trial in front of Homeland Security. And I met Jocelyn, and I saw that Jocelyn was willing to hold Eduardo's sick child while he went to see the doctor. I learned how they could give to each other. Sometimes Eduardo would let Maria, who was pregnant, up to the front of the line so that she could go first before the line of other guests waiting for service. So I learned from them that they were giving all of what they had. Me, I was just giving from the excess. So I'm hoping to, as we stop this part of our worship together, that we recognize that in all of this crisis, there is a stronger reality, which is the heaven that is here on earth, that we live in this time of heaven on earth, not the time of walls and falsehoods and the fear that we need to cling to the promise that heaven is here to guide us, and that we have these unique Quaker tools of centeredness, reciprocity, courage. These are tools that the world doesn't live by that Quakers can offer. And I know from my experience that we can transform crisis so that love rules. So in the first video, I presented ideas of gratitude, beauty, all as in amazement, not awfulness, and praying, for me, praying with angels. These are Quaker elements, and they're explained in the Bible as gifts of the Spirit. Mercy is one, kindness, joy. And these gifts are also in our relationship with the land. So look for the gifts of the Spirit in the earth, wherever we travel. Gratitude, spending time honoring the gifts of eagle, gifts of the swamp, spider, and milkweed. Can I give thanks for all of the earth and all creatures while I am doing Quaker work, like maybe even justice work? So earlier this winter, I had one of my more crazier justice actions. I was trying to stop a coal train. It was 80 cars of coal coming across Massachusetts. So we got on the train tracks, and it was in the middle of the night, and it was really cold. And was I thankful when I was staring at the headlights of the train trying to stop it on those tracks? No, I can't say I felt the thanks, but I'm learning. I'm learning to love in these times of distress when we are called to do kind of extraordinary actions. Here's some help from George Fox. He's one of many Quaker founders. He gives us seeds to plant because he wrote a very thick journal, which is filled with ideas. And this one speaks to integrity. Fox impels us. Be examples. Be patterns. Walk cheerfully over the world, answering to that of God in everyone. So I want to remodel these words for pandemic times. As you walk, wherever you are, you preach love by your presence.
You let your face mask speak louder than any words. Hold yourself alert and bring out the good in others, even when they may be averting their eyes. Be present to that of God in people who are in sickness, present to God even in these times of death. Be witnesses, don't withdraw. And don't conform to the American empire ways. Our American lifestyle says it's okay to ravage the earth, fracking gas where we're stealing from our future, taking all the aquifers. That is empire. Stealing land, ignoring the poor, drinking way too much, filling yourself with way too many drugs, and also maybe playing too many video games. So instead of all this, how can we rebuild our society? These times of crisis are asking that. And believe me, the time of crisis has as much new birth happening. It's a pregnant time. Listen for that of God birthing us into a new world. And there's a lot of fear that we need to move through that birth canal, out of the fear and out of racism. And, how do I recognize the force of love when the police have open hunting season on Black people? Well, one thing I do is I try to listen to our Black prophets like Cornel West or Reverend William Barber in the Poor People's Campaign. And Lila Syed is writing about white supremacy. Also, there's the peace testimony, which we can use as a blueprint to act on these words of prophecy that we hear. And there's many expressions of the Quaker peace testimony, right? Margaret Fell has one. John Woolman has a great peace testimony. But the traditional one that says, we utterly deny all outward forms of strife and war. And we refuse, we've agreed over the centuries to refuse to fight with physical weapons like guns, bogus courts. We aren't using the police to fight our battles. Quakers fight with spiritual weapons. Our work is to identify the weapons or tools and move into places of conflict with the tools. We must learn to be allies with those who are persecuted. So I went to several Black Lives Matter demonstrations recently, and in July, I was kind of afraid to go to one of my first ones. It was the very beginning of July. But I prayed and I told myself I'm going to go as a Quaker with some shield and power, and I'm going to be open-minded and look for love. So I took a friend and I went, and I found love. It was powerful witness. There was African drumming that just melted me. There was solemn dancing. There was people of color who spoke, inviting white people to listen. We were like 200 people in the middle of Boston, a place called Nubian Square. And I was taught by a African American woman, a Yoruba word, ashe, which means something like, may it come to be in its own power. And so we were invited to give thanks to our ancestors and to the powers of good at work. And out of this cacophony of voices, I heard myself saying, Bayard Rustin, ashe. Mary Dyer, ashe. Lucretia Mott, ashe. We shared deep grief together at that event, and a mutual respect entered me, and I saw a little glimpse of the new world that could be. I was invited in by people of color as family. And what were my spiritual weapons? Well, maybe it was a little humility, definitely expectation of healing. You know, Quakers also can act very well with our testimony of equality. Yeah, we work on equal treatment, voting rights. And I think as a beloved community, we're asked to do more. Can we, as white people, love people of color like family? Can I share all my larder? Can I cook with people of color? Can we eat meals together as family out of love? Can I be there? And can I be there when a police person pulls over an undocumented driver off the road and frisks them? Am I there as family for them? Can I be like family to the 14-year-old black youth who's expelled from school for waving a stick? Can Quakers who identify as white assume more risks? Now, I don't really know whether we are called to take more risks or whether just individual people can take more risks. But I do know we need to treat each other like family. So breathe. I'm going to close now, but go into yourself and find your spiritual gifts. What are you aware of? Wear these gifts like gems that glisten in these times of crisis. Listen in stillness. Tender your soul. Go forth valiantly. Know that Christ is baptizing us over and over again, and that the indwelling seed takes root inside of us. Friends have offered these words as spiritual gifts. It's like a living branch that we're still growing and reaching for. And we grow in love with all God's creatures in the universe. We're fighting evil with spiritual weapons. We're creating a new Garden of Eden.